Okay, if you have not done these questions already, I will walk through the first one or two so that you can check your work and get further explanation. And then try some more on your own after that. Okay, our first step is to identify what two numbers we're adding to and multiplying to. The adding to always comes from the b term, the thing multiplying the x, which is in this case the 7, so it's positive 7. And we're multiplying to the product of the outside, so 2 times 3 is 6. So to get 6, I could do 1 times 6, or I could do 2 times 3. And in terms of what adds together to make 7 would be a 1 and a 6. So I'm going to decompose or break down the middle term into a plus x and a plus 6x. And then we still have our plus 3 on the end. So the front and the end of the expression stays the same, and the middle is what gets broken down into the two pieces, and that was a plus 6 there. So the 7x is really this plus x and the plus 6x. All right, then we pair them up for a common factor. So I look at the first two and see what do they have in common. Well, I see an x in common, and that's about it. So I'm going to common factor x out. That means I would need to multiply x by 2x to get the 2x squared. And I would also need to multiply the x by a 1 to get the plus x. So that's how I'd get the first two terms of that expression. And then in the second pair, I see they both have a plus 3 in common. And I would need to multiply 3 by a 2x to get the 6x, and need to multiply the plus 3 by a plus 1 to get the plus 3. That cooks this up to have the 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 1, so those brackets are identical, like I need them to be. So I can common factor the 2x plus 1 out of both of those terms, leaving me with an x and a plus 3 to go into our brackets. Now you can always check your work. If you were to expand and simplify this times this, you should get back to the original question right here. That's a way to check your work. So if you have extra time at the end of a test, you can always see whether you did your factoring correctly or not. All right, the second one, I'm looking for two numbers that will add to negative 14, because that's the term in front of the x, and multiplies to, and 8 times 5 is 40. All right, so 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 3 doesn't go in evenly, but 4 does. 4 times 10 works. 5 times 8, 6 won't go in evenly, nor does 7, and then we're back to 8. So those are all my combinations there. My signs have to be the same because I'm multiplying to a positive, and they're both going to be negative because I'm adding to a negative. So the pair here that will add to negative 14 is the negative 4 and the negative 10. So I'm going to break down that negative 14x, so I've got my 8x squared, into a minus 4x and a minus 10x, and then a plus 5. And then from there I group them for a common factor, so 4 and x can come out of the first two, and a minus 5 can come out of the second pair. And so I said 4 and x come out of the first two. That leaves me with a 2 and an x. That makes the 8x squared when I multiply those. I would need a minus and a 1 to hold the place of the minus 4x. I'm going to take a minus 5 out of the next set, and that leaves me with a positive 2x, which is what I need to match this one. And I would have a minus 1 to get a minus 5 times minus 1 to get that positive 5 up here, and then that makes these two brackets the same, so I can common factor those away or out, and that's a 2x and a minus 1, and then we have a 4x minus 5. All right, and again, I could expand and simplify that to check. Okay, I'm going to just go through the next examples. I'll put all my work up, but I'm not going to explain them all. If you have more questions, please ask, but do check your answers once you've tried them all. Hopefully you can check your answers. If there's anything you're not sure about, please ask me for some help, and I will try and help you through it. Hopefully I haven't made any mistakes with this. Moving on to the next slide. with the next 4 examples, I have cooked some things in here that you need to be aware of. The ones I've given you so far have all been fairly straightforward in terms of there's only one type of factoring, but we will eventually start mixing the factoring up. So we should always look for a common factoring first. No matter what kind of factoring that comes up, we should always check to see if there's anything common we can take out first. It's usually helpful also if the coefficient of x squared is a positive. So in order to have that happen, we sometimes need to common factor -1 out of every term. Or if there's another number you can take with that besides the 1, a negative value, then go ahead and do that. For example, in part G, I don't like to start with an x squared term being negative, so I'm going to actually common factor negative, and then I'm looking, is there anything besides negative that's common? 2 is the only even number, nothing else. There's only x squared x, and then the 5 doesn't have an x, so no, there's nothing else that's common with this particular example. So my first step with this one is going to be that I'm going to factor out -1. So you could put the 1 there, or you can just put a negative there. That's going to leave me with a positive 2x squared. That becomes a plus 9x and a minus 5. All right, and now I'm going to treat it just like a question before, but just working with what's inside the brackets. So I'm adding to positive 9, and I'm going to multiply to negative 10. So two numbers have to have opposite signs. The bigger one's the positive. So 1 and 10 multiply to 10, and I'm going to make the 1 the negative, and there it is. That's the combination that adds to positive 9. So I don't need to check any further combinations. So I'm going to break down that 9x to be a minus x and a plus 10x, and then we still have our minus 5 on the end. And then we treat it just like we did before. I'm going to look for a pair these up and look for a common factor for each pair. And this negative just floats down alongside here. X is common. I would have a 2x and a minus 1. And then out of the 10x and the minus 5, I have a plus 5, which I would need to multiply it by a 2x and a minus 1. Okay, now some people prefer to make these square brackets here, just so that they're not as confusing with the circular brackets. At this point, we have a 2x minus 1 for each of our terms here, so that can come out front. 2x minus 1, common factoring that, and the negative is just floating on down with this. The second set of brackets should be an x plus 5. Okay, with h, I'm going to get you started on this. The first step, for every term or every trinomial that we've done so far, we've always had the x squared term first. So I'm going to rewrite this in the order of minus 4x squared. And then I'm going to put the x term next, which is minus 9x. And then the constant number is a plus 9. So we have plus 9 on the end of that. Make sure the sign in front always travels with whatever it is that you're moving around. At this point, I have a negative leading coefficient, and I'm going to factor the negative out, and I'm just looking to see if there's anything more besides just a negative I can take out, and nope, there isn't. So I'm going to have positive 4x squared now in the bracket, and then I would have a plus 9x, and then I would have a minus 9. And then my process is the same as before. Find two numbers that will add to 9 and multiply to 4 times negative 9 is negative 36, and go from there with that one. When you get to part I, it has a positive in front, but if you look at every single term, I'm thinking that they're at least divisible by 2. 2 goes into 12 6 times, 2 goes into 22 11, 6 and 11 have nothing left in common. So 2 is our common factor. That will be your first step. Common factor the 2 out first. Leaves you with a 6x squared minus 11x and a minus 7. And then from there, you treat it like before. You're looking for two numbers that will add to negative 11 and multiply to negative 42. Darn it. Okay, so go from there, see what you can do with those questions, and then I will put my solutions up here. Check my answers over with your answers. Hopefully we get the same final answers Remember, the order of multiplication does not matter, so if you have the exact same brackets but written in a different order, that should still be the same answer. For example, for the last one, you might have 2x, and then you might have your 3x minus 2 first, and then your x plus 5. As long as what's inside the brackets is identical, the order of the brackets themselves does not matter.